Drunk Dog Creative. Today I'm going to demonstrate how to make the double diamond pop-up card. This is one example of it. I did it with a rather rustic look with some pecan pie ribbon. I put an optional band around it because, as you can see, it pops up right away and is hard to keep closed in just an envelope. But this is the design when it's closed, and when you open it, those panels float and pop and just look sensational. There's space to write your message on the back, and there's a couple of options. Now with this one, I've done double matting on every single piece there is. You can leave the mechanism plain and not do any matting, or you can do just a single mat on it. I've done the double mat, which is a little more cutting and pasting, but I think it looks quite nice. And it sort of sits up, or it's hard to demonstrate, it sits up a few different ways, and then it closes like that. And then, of course, you can slip it into the band and retie it to hold it closed and put it in an envelope. It's 6 inches by 6 inches, so it fits in square envelopes. So I'm going to get started by giving you the cut pieces first, and then showing you some tips and tricks for assembling. You can use any patterned paper you want, design any front piece that you want. I'll show you a couple of examples. For this one, I've used the Gorgeous Grape, the Crumb Cake is the brown, and then the Perennial Lavender Designer Series paper with some Gorgeous Grape and Highland Heather accents. What I'm going to demonstrate for you today, I'm using Pretty Peacock along with Highland Heather, and again some of that beautiful Perennial Lavender DSP paper. The cut for this, there's a lot of pieces. So I'm going to talk you through the main cuts, and then I'm going to give you some hints for how to handle the smaller cuts. And this time I've gone ahead and sticky noted everything because there's a lot to it. So the first thing we're going to do is our card base. Your card base is going to be 12 inches by 6 inches, and it's going to have some score lines that I'm going to demonstrate after I show you the cut pieces, because there's some tricks to it. So a 12 inch by 6 inch piece, I am using 12 inch by 12 inch Stampin' Up! Cardstock, which comes in all of the same colors as the A4 cardstock. So that's Pretty Peacock. Then you want the two side panels. So side mat 1, which would be these pieces. They are 2 3/4 inch by 5 3/4 inch, and you want to cut 2 of them. So that's mat 1 for the side pieces. Mat 2, which goes on top of them, is 2 1/2 inches by 5 1/2 inches, and you cut 2 of them. Now, if you're using patterned paper, like this beautiful Designer Series paper, you want to make sure when you cut them, if there's a particular direction, that you cut them going in the right direction. Because if I'd cut the paper this way, my panels would have been the wrong way. So just pay attention to pattern direction for all of these cuts. So that's the side mat. All of these instructions are in writing on my blog on drunkdogcreative.com, so that should help you. For the two front diamonds, if you're going to mat them, the bigger mat is this one. I call it Front Diamond Mat 1. It's 1 7/8 inch by 1 7/8 inch, and you cut 2 of those. For the diamond front, now in this case I've used a plainer patterned paper because this is where you're going to build whatever you want on the front. If you're just going to simply stamp something that's a flat stamp or a sentiment, you might want to make these white and stamp on them, or you can do what I did on this one and then use a white sentiment over it, or whatever embellishments you're going to use. That's up to you. But if you're going to do this mat, I recommend something plain, because it's usually covered by something else. And these are 1 3/4 inch by 1 3/4 inch, and you need 2 of those. So this is all double-sided DSP in this pack, and it is beautiful. You're gonna want writing panels for the back. These are up to you whether you want one or both. They're 2 3/4 inch by 5 3/4 inch times 2. For these, I've used the Trio punch to do a fancy edging. On the other card, I just curved the corners. You can leave them square any way you want, but that's on the back of the card. You want 2 of those. Now the pop-up mechanism gets fun. To start with, if you're going to mat them, if you're only going to do 1 mat, then you cut mat 1. If you're going to do 2 mats, you cut mat 1 and 2. If you're not going to mat them, you leave this out. This is optional. But your mat 1, you want to cut 3 pieces that are 2.5 inch by 2.5 inch each. And we are going to cut these down even further, but I want to demonstrate how to do that and show you some tips. So for now, you just cut 3 squares that are 2.5 by 2.5 each. If you're going to do a second panel on the pop-up mechanism, a second mat, this one is probably best if it's not something where the direction really matters, because these are going to be cut up into really little triangles. I figured the leafy pattern could go any which way. You can see on this one, I used one that had some direction, but it didn't really matter at the end of the day because it's a subtle pattern. So you cut 3 of these at 2 1/4 inch by 2 1/4 inch. And then we're going to cut them up even more after this. And I'm going to give you some tips to make that easier. Now, if you're going to put a band around it, there's a couple other things to cut, and this is optional. You're going to cut 2 pieces. You're going to cut one piece that's 10 1/4 inches by 4 inches, and you're going to score it at 4 inches. So it's actually going to go that way. You're going to score it at 4 inches, and then you can turn it either way. Then another piece that is 4 1/2 inches by 4 inches, scored at the 1/2 inch mark. So these two, this will simply glue onto here like that, and then they form your band. And again, this is optional. If you're going to mat the band because you don't want it to be plain, you then want 2 pieces of whatever designer series paper you want to go on it. And they are going to be 3 3/4 inch by 3 3/4 inch square. And you'll see later when I assemble it how that works. Again, there's a lot of pieces to this, so I have labeled them all, and I am trying to keep them all together. So that's your basic cut file. Now there's some basic tools that I've used to make this card. One is a hole punch, any kind of hole punch. The other is your preferred adhesive. I'm using Stampin' Seal. I'm also giving the option of glue for the really fiddly bits. You use whatever adhesive you prefer. Some sort of ribbon if you're going to use the band to close the band with. And the tools that I never go anywhere without when I'm making things are, my bone folder and my take your pick. I use this for everything. If you followed my videos before, you know that. The bone folder is essential for this one because unless you get the creases really sharp, it's not going to sit properly. The other things I'm using is from the Perennial Lavender bundle. And this is the Painted Lavender stamp set. You can also get dies that go with it. You can either buy them separately or you can buy them as a bundle, which has a discount, or buy them as part of the whole suite. So this is the Perennial Lavender stamps and dies. Then there's also the Perennial Postage bundle. So again, you can buy them, the stamps and the dies separately, or bundle them together for a savings. These are just really useful sentiments for everything. They are the rubber stamps, whereas the other ones are the photopolymer. And these are the dies that are bundled with it. It gives you basically postage stamps in all different sizes and embellishments. So that's great. Again, if you get the whole suite, it comes with all of the papers and some gems and some butterflies and some really cool things. So I just thought I'd show that off. The other tool that you really need is a paper trimmer. I'll try and put it where you can see it, and some sort of scorer. Now I'm specifically using the Stampin' Up! One, not just because I think it's really good, but because this makes it easy to make all of the fiddly cuts you need to make if you're going to put mats on all of that pop-up mechanism. And I'm going to show you how it goes. You can tell mine's well loved and well used. I should have scraped some of the adhesive off of it before I started demoing with it. But anyways, this is the Stampin' Up! Paper trimmer. It has a cutting blade and a scoring blade. It has the ruler that pulls out, and it's very sturdy, and it's got a couple nifty features I'm about to show you. A photo of this will be on the blog at drunkdogcreative.com to show you the cut and score lines for your 12-inch by 6-inch card base. There's one cut line, which is through the middle, but you're going to do score lines at 3 inches, 4.5 inches, 7.5 inches, and 9 inches. And then you're going to do score lines in a box and 2 big diagonals. And I'll give you some tips for that when I demonstrate it in a minute. Then after, you're going to do a cut line through the middle, and I'll give you 2 options for that. So I've got my 12 by 6 inch card base right here. I'm going to tuck my cutting blade out of the way. I have mistaken the two before and cut when I meant to score and scored when I meant to cut. So I tend to keep my cutting blade at the bottom, my scoring blade at the top. I want to do scoring lines at 3 inches, at 4.5 inches, at 7.5 inches, and at 9 inches. So those are my 4 first score lines. When you use those to find the others. So the next score line is going to be from the top of the left to the bottom of the right. And what you do is this groove right here is your cut and score groove. So you're going to put the point of that top left one and the point of the bottom right one so that they line up in that groove. You use that groove to find your alignment. You put that right in the middle of the groove, that in the middle of the groove. You can even see it through. There's a channel through the ruler that you can see through, and you run that scorer back and forth, and you should have a line that connects those 2 points. And then you turn it around and you do exactly the same thing on this side. And that gives you your big X through the middle. I hope you can see that. That gives you your X through the middle. So now what we're going to do is now to do the square or the diamond through the middle, I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to measure from the left to the far right score lines, which is 6 inches. And I'm just going to put a little pencil mark. I don't know if you can see that on camera, right at the 3-inch mark there. And I'm going to do the same on each side. It'll be 6 inches on each side. So you're just going to put a little pencil mark at the 3-inch mark and pencil so you can erase it. Sometimes it's hard to see the lines on the darker paper. Just a little pencil mark on each side. And then you're going to do what I just did with the others, in that you're going to line up the top pencil mark into that groove. You can't line that into the groove because you can't see the groove, so you close your ruler and then you move your paper, keeping that bottom where it is, preferably, Move your paper until that pencil line is in the middle of the groove here. I don't know if you can see this. My pencil mark is right there, and there's this groove, and I can see it through the groove, and I can see this pencil mark through the groove lined up right on the channel that runs right under this one. So we know that that's okay. You just pick this up a little bit and you put it down so that, see that there's a line. Let's see if I can tilt this. There are lines on the side of the blades, on all four sides, that tell you exactly where your line is. So if I line that up to where that pencil, oh, now I've moved it. I've got to move it back. Hang on. So I know, I can see that that's at about the 4.5 mark. So if I put this line here to line up with the 4.5 mark, I know I'm roughly on the right spot, and this will go right off the edge. So I just score there, and I can lift this, and bingo, my score line is perfect. Now I'm going to do this on all four sides. So again, line that edge one up to the channel, close that, and then swivel till that pencil mark lines up in the channel. And I can see that it's about the 8 1/8. So I'm going to move this till this line lines up with the measurement. And then I'm going to score it. And that gives me that score. And we just go all the way around that way. Whichever one is open to the channel, line that up first and close your guide. Wiggle it a little if you have to. Move that mark into the channel. Oh, keep the score out. Now I've lost this. Okay. And then wiggle it again until both marks are in that channel. And I want to stop this at roughly 4 1/8. So I wait till this is roughly in line with where I think that is. And that's it. One more side to do. And there. So it's a little fiddly, but this paper trimmer gives you the ability to line up all of those odd angles. So the next thing I'm going to do is crease every fold and really crease it. So I'm going to take those two side flaps and I'm going to crease them kind of both ways with my bone folder. At this point, it doesn't matter if they're mountain or valley. Those two side ones need a really good crease. Then I'm going to do my two diagonals that were across the middle. And those are mountain folds. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, a mountain fold is when it forms a peak. A valley fold is when it goes down. So those two are mountain folds. Then I'm going to do this side one. Again, the vertical ones don't matter which way you do it because they're going to go all different ways once the others are activated. And then all I've got left are these ones. I'm going to just hand crease those because we don't want to crease out through there. I'm just going to hand crease those for now. They'll get the bone folder later, but I'm just going to hand crease them before I do the final cut. Now, the final cut is going to be through the middle. So I am going to line this up so that it's on the 3-inch mark and make sure it's squared. So 3-inch, 3-inch squared. I'm going to lift this and gently put it down and make sure that these lines on each side are lined up with this line, which is at the 3-inch mark. And then I'm going to put it all the way down. And then the thing with cutting with this is the harder you press, the more frayed your paper could be. you need to press lightly for it to cut. And I'm going to slide it all the way down until those middle marks reach this line, so that I'm just cutting through the middle carefully. I'm going to lift it up, and then what I've got is the middle cut. Now the other thing you can do as an option is just cut and leave those two tips touching so that your floating diamonds aren't separate. If you're going to do it that way, you have to be absolutely precise with your cuts and your folds, or they won't fold properly, which is why it's easier to just cut through and have them separate and floating. So that part's now done. Put this away for a minute. So what you've got now is, oh, I've thrown a valley fold on each side and a mountain fold for your verticals. To make the mechanism pop up, what you're going to do is push those two down. Now, do you see what just happened? I pushed those down and it very easily went into the right fold. Just push those down. If you've used your bone folder on everything else, if you finger folded those weird diagonals, all you've got to do is push. And now you've got your mechanism. Now you can just bring it together and realign it. If it's slightly off, this is where you can now move it around a little bit so that it all fits together neatly. And this is where you can get your bone folder out and get into these folds and really push on them from underneath. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing, but I'm going on top and underneath. So the sharper you can get these creases, the better the card will close. Now, that one's gone slightly wonky, so I'm just going to fix that up by hand. Okay. So there's your card base for your double diamond pop-up. Now, the next part is optional, but it's tricky. It's where you have to cut the mats for all the diamonds. Now, these are already cut. They're straightforward, but it's these mechanism ones. So I've used two labels, large pop-up mechanism and small pop-up mechanism. The large pop-up mechanism are these larger triangles, and the small pop-up mechanism are these smaller triangles with the fold. So we're going to do that. I'm going to cut those pieces next. We can put this aside. All right, now I'm going to talk to you about how to do these mats for the pop-up mechanism. Because they get fiddly, I've pulled out 4 envelopes to put them in as soon as I've cut them so they don't get lost or mixed up. I want to reuse these envelopes, so I've just put sticky notes on them, labeling them. You can just label the envelopes, but I don't want to waste them because you won't use them for terribly long. We're going to start with the pop-up mechanism mat 1. Okay, so the pop-up mechanism mat 1 and mat 2. These are going to make both your large and small pop-up mechanism pieces. So let's start with mat 1. Now, if you're only doing one mat, then this should probably be a patterned paper in this size. This is these 4 triangles. If I put this flat, it's these 4. So you're going to take one piece and cut it into 4. And again, this is where we use the channel. This makes it so easy. One point in there, its opposite point in there. Put the mat down, the guide down, and make sure it's even. And gently cut those in half. And then you cut each of those in half again. You can do 2 at a time if you're really steady and really sure that you're not wiggling it, but it's safer to do one. So what I do is I line that bottom edge along the straight line so that I know it's square-ish, triangle-ish. And then I put the point right in the middle of the channel, and again, wiggle until this is right on the line, and then I simply cut in half. And then I know I've got two triangles that are roughly the same size. Now, you can always be a little bit out. So these do not always come out exact, but it's a homemade card. So if you like everything absolutely perfect, this is probably not the best design. But overall, when your person you're giving this to opens it, they're not going to say, okay, well, that mat is 1/8 of an inch out, or that one's 1/4 inch out, or they're not going to do that. Trust me. It took me years to let go of it being perfect. But anyways, you put that point right in the middle. You line up that bottom along that line, and you cut. So that is your large pop-up mechanism mat 1. And I'm going to put those in the envelope that says large mechanism mat 1 until I am ready to use them. Now you have two more of these. This is small mechanism mat 1, which will go in this envelope. These are going to be cut even more. So you do exactly the same thing as you did for the other. You line it up, the 2 points in the channel, cut it in half. Cut it in half again. I'm going to attempt to do the 2 at a time, but you have to have steady hands and not let either of them slip if you're going to do that. So again, the point in that channel, bottom lined up along the ruler line. Close that, double check it's still the same. Hold it closed and cut in half. See, it did not go through the second one. I knew that was going to happen. Do that again. Now, that's the same as what you did for the large mat. Well, you're going to cut all of these in half again for the small pop-up mechanism mat. So again, and the smaller they are, the fiddly they are to line up properly, and the possibility of it moving. So be very gentle. See, that's what can happen. Be very gentle when you're cutting it, and make sure you hold it well. So you're going to line that up again, put the guide down. You want to really make sure you are holding that down, even on both sides, as long as you don't get in the way. So you're going to cut each of those in half again. So what you're going to end up with is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 mats for the small mechanism. So again, options. Leave it plain. Don't put anything on there. Do just one mat of a pretty decorative paper. Or just mat the large ones and not the small ones. So any combination of however you want to do it is okay, because you get to make whatever card you want. But what you will need is to take these two squares and make them into 16 little triangles. And while I try to do it 2 by 2, I highly recommend doing it 1 by 1. Because see, it's just going to separate. So, all right, so I'm going to finish these and I'll be back in a second. Okay, so I've got my 16 little triangles and I'm going to pop them into their envelope. They are the small mechanism mat 1. And this is also where this paper trimmer is great, because you can just swipe them off the edge like that. So they're all going in the envelope. And then for mat 2, this is your pop-up mechanism mat 2. You have your 3 2 1/4 inch squares. Same exact thing. One of them you will cut into 4 pieces. and that is your large mechanism mat 2. I'm going to pop them into the envelope. And then small mechanism mat 2, the remaining 2 into 16 triangles. And I'm back with the small mechanism mat 2, which now goes into that envelope. So I'm just going to put them into my hand. And they're ready to be used. So that's my tip for using the paper trimmer to do your scoring and your cutting all in one piece. I do have a scoreboard that I use for a lot of things, but I find having the scorer on here is especially useful for those weird angles and the things that stop and start in the middle instead of an edge, and for this channel to line things up is brilliant. Put that away. So now it's a question simply of assembling the card. So I have my base. All I'm going to do is take my mat 1 and mat 2 and put those on first. I'm going to tape them to these sides. So this is Pretty Peacock, and this is Highland Heather. And get out my Stampin' Seal. And I usually do this by sight to get the edges even, but I also find if I'm struggling, using the grid on the grid paper is really helpful. And then put the mats on again. If the pattern has a particular direction, make sure that you've cut it and you place it using that direction. Sorry, my tape ran out and I need to do a quick refill change, which is super easy to do. Just take the refill out, open this, pop that mechanism out, line those two things up with the refill, and pop the front back on, and you're ready to go. So those two are done. The next thing I'm going to do is the front 2 diamonds. So here I've got mats 1 and 2. Now, these get easier to center because you can use the points to line it all up. You can use glue as well. You don't have to use tape. And then I've chosen to use the back of this to have a slightly plainer front that still tones with everything else, because I want to put embellishments on it rather than just having it stand on its own. You can also use white if you want to just stamp something on it and not have like a 3D embellishment. Okay, so you could stop there. You know, that could be your card. with whatever you're going to put on the front. You don't have to add anything to the pop-up mechanism. It does work just like that. What adding mats to it does is it gives it a little bit more stability because of the thickness, but that also makes it much harder to keep folded. If you're going to use both mats, you really do need the band around it. If you're going to just leave it there, you can once again go in with your bone folder, crease everything down a bit better, and probably get away without the band. But if you do want to cover all of those panels, that's where it takes a bit more time. Before we do that, I'm going to turn this over, and I'm going to put my two writing panels on the back. Again, you can do just one, you can do both, you can do whatever you want. And you can leave them square, you can round the corners, you can do fancy corners like I've done using the Very Best Trio die. You can die cut, whatever you want. But those are then your writing panels on the back of the card. But now we're going to do the really fiddly part, which is all of these pop-up mechanism mats. So I'm going to put this aside. I'm going to take out my large mechanism mat 2 and large mechanism mat 1, and I'm going to assemble them together before I put them on the card. So I've got the 4 large triangles and the 4 larger DSP triangles. Now, you can use your tape to do this, but triangles are a weird shape, and if you don't want the edges to curl, I just recommend using glue. So I also recommend, if you're going to use glue, that you do it on a silicone sheet and not on grid paper, because the glue gets very sticky and tacky. And it's okay if it's on the grid paper, because you can just pull that top sheet off and throw it away. But I'm going to do it on my silicone sheet because then it's easier to clean up the glue. So you're going to take your small, your second mat, and just put a drop of glue and spread it around. I probably put too much because you don't want too much. You don't want it to kind of get around. And then you're going to line it up on the other mat. The glue does dry. Make sure it's a glue that dries clear. And you have enough time to kind of move it into position if you're not happy with it before it dries. You can just take that off. This gets all over your hands. I often use an alcohol-based wet wipe to keep my hands in the workspace okay during this, or a damp cloth. I'm going to just pick some of that up and put it on the back. And again, if this paper that you've used is directional, then you want to sort of, when you're cutting it, think about that. But it's easier to use one where the direction doesn't really matter, or it's just too hard to get it into those 16 or 8 little triangles. Now this is where, if you're a perfectionist, you're not going to want to do this, because there's no way to get it exactly even, all of them exactly the same. It's just too fiddly. The pieces are too small. But you do want to get it as best you can so that there's sort of an even border all the way around. So that's my 4 large ones. Now I've got to do it to all 16 of the small ones. So I'll get out. So there's the 16 small mechanisms, mat 1 and mat 2. Just put these to the side and let them dry. And this is where it gets a little bit tedious and a little bit painful. And if it's a double-sided print, you have to remember which one you're using. So I'm using the green of this one. And again, some of these cuts will be slightly off because they're just so tiny to do. So if one really doesn't fit on the bottom, try it on a different one. Like if you don't like how it looks on one, pick up another one and just get it close. Does not have to be exact. If you want it to be exact, do a different design or leave the mats out completely, because it just can't. And this is very tacky glue, so yeah, I'm not going to make you sit through it all, trust me. I'm going to just do them and come back to you. Okay, I am back and the pieces should be dry. So now we have our 4 large triangles and we have our 16 small triangles, and I have a dog who wants me to throw his toy. Okay, now we take our card base and we try to smooth it out a little bit flat. And this is now simply a matter of gluing or taping the 4 large ones and the 16 small ones. I'll do a couple of them, but I won't make you sit through my doing them all. So I've got my glue. I'm just gonna, and the important thing here is to not rest your card where there was just glue. Even if you pick it up with your wet wipe, that'll be wet. So you want your card to be in the same spot at all times and not ever get the glue on the back, because you know even if it dries clear, it's noticeable. So I'm going to affix, and the thing about using glue instead of tape is that it dries clear, but you can wiggle and move if you need to. So let's just do the 4 big ones together. And again, you're never going to get this perfect. Ugh. Okay, although you should get it more perfect than that. But it'll be good enough that when you give this card to a friend or whoever you're giving it to, they're not going to notice that you're that tiny bit out. They're just not. I used to think they did, and a couple friends pointed out to me that they don't. So I'm going to take their word for it. Again, this Tombow is very, very tacky glue. It sticks a lot to your hands and to everything. So I do keep a moistened wet wipe, or, you know, a rag with water or something so I can wipe my hands as I go, because it really sticks to you. So those are the 4 big ones. Now we're going to do the same thing with the 16 little ones. And I'll just do one. Okay, so there's one, and you just have to line it up to the space. It'll only fit one way, but you see how we start to fill in the spaces now. And try as best you can to line the points up and line the lines up as best you can. All right, I'm going to do the rest and I'll be back in a minute. Okay, so all of those little triangles are now on, and we're going to let that dry. But you can see that it really adds an awful lot of visual interest if you have the patience to cut and paste them all on. I'm going to let that dry while I do the band and show you how to put that together. This is pretty simple. The only fiddly part is punching the holes. So we've done our 2 pieces. We've scored this one at 1/2 inch, and we've scored this one at 4 inches. So, sorry, that glue is still all over my hands. The 4-inch fold goes on the right, and the 1/2 inch fold goes on the left, and you're gonna tape it so that it's on the inside. Often you can do it either way. If you do it this way, that line will show on the back. If you do it this way, it won't show. Totally up to you. I'm just gonna take my Stampin' Seal, which is pretty strong stuff, and run it down there. And then I am going to flip these over, and I'm just gonna line that edge up with the fold line and the top and bottom and press. And then I've hidden that line on the inside, which is just how I like to do it, but you can do it however you want. So you can decide which one you want on front, but you have to decide when we get to the hole punching. So I really like left over right, but it's up to you. So I can see that that fold is slightly out. So what I can do is just push that into place and then hit it with the bone folder and it'll line up correctly. All right, so that part's done. I'm gonna open it out and I'm gonna put the 2 DSPs. Now, the reason I don't use 2 mats for this, sorry, that's my dog whining in the background. He has this manky chewed up toy that's all full of hair and he insists that I throw it for him constantly or he whines the whole way. So I'll just give that a toss and multitask here. Now, the reason I'm not doing a double mat is because you don't want the band to be too heavy and you want it to have a little bit of flexibility. And so I don't want to weight it down, and one is enough. So I'm going to just put some tape. Oop, helps to take the cap off first, doesn't it? Just put some glue tape right around all 4 sides. Missed that bit. And then just center it on, hang on. Yeah, so I had it upside down. Probably not a good idea. Center it on there. On the right side, you can cheat it a little more to the right, and on the left, you'll do the same. But you want to make sure it's the right way around. I almost put it upside down. Anyways, same with the other one. Put some adhesive on it. And you want to center this one pretty centered, you know, eyeball it. And so then you have the front, time to throw again. And now you're going to punch holes for the ribbon in it. And all right, I'm going to show you how to easily figure out where to put your holes to thread the ribbon through this. You start with the top flap, whichever one you decided was the top flap. I'll keep it folded. You put your ruler on it and you take a pencil and you're going to put a mark on the edge at 1 inch from each end. So the 1 and the 3. And then you're going to line your ruler up on that and go 1 inch in, and you're going to make a pencil mark. I'm going to make a little cross there so I can see it. The hole punch should punch it all out. I'm going to come in 1 inch and I'm going to make a little cross there so I can see it. Hopefully the hole punch will take all of that out, but then you can just erase the edges, and anything the hole punch doesn't remove, you can also erase. So then I take my hole punch and I'm eyeballing from the side where to make sure that the punch goes right over the X, and I punch it out. And I'm going to do the same here, just eyeballing to make sure the punch goes right over the X. So that's my first set of holes. Now, to make sure the holes on the flap under are in exactly the same place, you just close it and make an X through the first hole. And now they will line up exactly, hopefully. So then I take my hole punch and I eyeball it from the side to make sure I'm going to punch right over that X. I do that, and look at that. They've pretty much lined up. Then I'm going to take my ribbon and my ruler. I'm not good at tying bows, so I like to give myself extra so that I can tie the bow. So I'm going to give myself 16 inches of ribbon here. And I'm going to just thread it through one of the bottom holes on the bottom piece. Nope, the other way. Yeah, so when you've got your flaps, whichever way they open, whichever is the bottom one, I'm going to go from the top to the back to the top, and pull it till that's about even. And then I can thread it through the top holes. And again, just till it's even. And then I just, so you can either tie the bow so that it's vertical, or tie it, twist, and then do the bow part so that it sits horizontal. And then it's a question of just playing with the bow that you've tied. I told you I was bad at this. For things like this, I usually use my Zutter bow tying machine, but it won't work with a bow that you don't just paste on. So, and then you can adjust it, and then you can cut ends to whatever you want. But to get it to sit vertical, you just twist it before you do the last tie. And you can just slip this over your card, or you can untie it, take off the front, leave it on that side, put the card in, close it, thread it through, and tie it again. We'll do that at the end. So that's how you do the band to kind of hold the card closed. Okay, so we had a minor issue where my phone, which has been fully charged, completely ran out of battery in the middle of filming how I decorated the card. So I'm going to show you the finished card, and then I'm going to backtrack a little and redo a couple things to show you. What I've got is I made a kind of bouquet from the Painted Lavender stamp and die set. I had a bunch of pieces that I had done, and I made a bouquet with it. Also using some of the beautiful little faceted gems from the Perennial Lavender Suite, and these wonderful butterflies. You get several pages of these that have 3 half like flying butterflies and 2 whole in different sizes. And all I simply did with the butterfly I had is I took my Highland Heather ink pad and my blending brush, and I very lightly went over the butterfly with it. So you can see on my pad here, I'll give you an example. I'm gonna grab another one of these out of the paper and show you. So I just put my blending brush on the ink, rubbed a little bit of it off so it wouldn't go blotchy, and then gently and lightly rubbed over the butterfly to give it a bit of color. And you can go over it until it's whatever, if you want it very light, you just lightly do it once. If you want it darker, you just go over it again, and you fill in whatever spots don't look quite right. If some are, lighter than you want or darker, well, if they're darker than you want, you have to leave it. But so then the butterfly is colored in and not white anymore and can be added to whatever you want. I love these. I think they're a fabulous idea. They come in the Perennial Lavender Suite and can be purchased separately, as can these. But what I really wanted to show you is my tip for building like a multi-layered embellishment like this one here. Now, the other sad thing is I'm really hoping my mother isn't watching this video because she's now seen the card she's getting for Mother's Day. So again, using the Perennial Postage stamp and die set that can be purchased on their own or as part of the suite, I die cut and stamped a Happy Mother's Day symbol for the front. I did a larger one to begin with, and as you can see, it covers that diamond nicely. If I was going to use that, I probably wouldn't use the mats. And this is where you can start to get creative with this design and do different things. I probably would have left that on its own, or maybe done it in the Highland Heather and embossed it in white or something like that. But I also like the little one. So I'm going to show you how I build this in an easy way. If you've ever tried to build a multi-layered thing like a bouquet with paper, you know how hard it is to keep it in the position you want it. And if you use adhesive tape or glue while you're building it, and you don't like where you've put it, you're stuck. So I have a secret weapon. I use repositional tape runner. So this tape is repositional. You can pull things off it, put things back down. It's not permanent. And what I do is I cut a scrap of paper. It can be any color, whatever you want. And I put repositional tape on both sides of it, being careful not to stick it back down on paper, although you can pull it off. So I just put a bunch of repositional tape on both sides, and then I use that to start to build what I want. So if this sort of forms the foundation for my bouquet, I'm going to put that down first, and then maybe, one of these, except I want to layer something between it. So I'm going to put a bit more tape on there, and I'm going to use take my pick to take out the bits that didn't come out when I took it off the die machine, and maybe decide where I want that. And you can just keep using layers of repositional tape because then you can pull them off. So that can go there. I want some greenery, and I used most of my greenery on the other one, but this is where having it on the back helps, because now I can position that behind instead of lifting everything off and doing it again. Maybe fill in a little bits there. Probably not ideal, but I'm not going to go cut some more. Ideally, you want more of those. If it's getting full, you just run some more over the back. And this way the heights don't necessarily matter as much either. You can put them wherever you want. Like that sticking up there. You just play with them until it's where you want it. Maybe a couple of these in the front. So the repositional tape is also pretty clear. So you can do things, tiny little half butterfly. Let's play with that somewhere. That would be cute. Probably better to do that with a tiny bit of glue from the fine edge, as long as I really know where I want it and don't want to move it. I love how the lime just sort of pops a little. So you just play with it. And you can see most of that paper is now hidden. At the end, I'll just take some snips and snip away what I don't want to show. Also, I will either using glue or my stamp and seal, put permanent tape on another little piece. And moving that higher so it really doesn't show, I'll put that piece across to kind of hold them together. Now, if this is going on a card front, you don't have to take all these off and then redo it with permanent. The repositional will hold it enough for a card front. If you want it more permanent, then you're probably going to want to just put a thin layer of dry clear glue or something. But as you can see, I put a bow over the bottom. So I put some of the little sparkle gems into the flowers, and I decided where I wanted it to sit. And then I put a bow over the bottom so it looks like a little bouquet. And I put the butterfly on the flowers on this one. So that's my little tip for building multi-layered embellishments, is use repositional tape or repositional glue and build it on whatever size. Like this was small, so I did a 1 inch by 1 inch square. Whatever size cardstock you want, layer it up front and back, and then put one more piece to kind of hold it all together at the back, and then you just put it on your item. That's my hot tip for the day. So moving all this away, try to keep the workspace neat. What you see then is the finished card, the Happy Mother's Day floating diamond card, and of course with the band to keep it together in the envelope, which I'll then tie later. So there's your card using the Perennial Lavender Suite, which I think might be one of my favorites that Stampin' Up! Has come out with.